Okay, let's have some fun by looking at some culture, some literature, and some art from the 14th century and onward. And let's see how some of these ideas of the inner word are applied in the development of Western culture. And when I say the inner word, I'm thinking specifically of that phenomenon that is described by Gadamer and Zimmerman of the relationship between, both relying on Augustine, of that relationship between the event of the realization of a truth, so the sense of a unity, a wholeness, a oneness, and the unpacking of that over time. So the experience of things as multiplicity, as difference, as particulars that are discussed dialogically. We're going to look at the relationship between those two phenomena, the sense of a whole and the sense of a discursive unfolding. So I'm just going to go to my other screen here and look at, first of all, a few lines from Dante's Divine Comedy. So Dante was an Italian poet. He writes the Divine Comedy from about the year 1300 to 1321, so right at the beginning of the 14th century. He is not the well, I suppose he is the considered to be the first major Italian poet writing in not Latin, but the vernacular, so modern Italian, very early modern form of it, but modern Italian. And so here, these are lines that are taken from the very last canto of the Divine Comedy, which is divided into 3 books, the Inferno, Purgatory, and then Paradise. And so these are from the very last canto of Paradise. And what has happened to Dante is he is starts with him being confused and wandering in a wood, something like a midlife crisis or something like that. And he is led on a journey through hell and purgatory and eventually up into heaven. And at the end of all this is part of his ultimate revelation, or the vision that is given to him of heaven. And I've given you the lines here in Italian and in English, and we'll work with them both just so we have a sense of what he's doing with his actual language. And my apologies to those of you who are Italian speakers. I'll do the best I can. But what I want you to notice is the relationship between the one and the many here. So, oh, abounding grace, by which I dared to fix my look on the eternal light so long that I spent all my sight upon it. In its depth I saw that it contained, bound by love in one volume, that which is scattered in leaves through the universe, substances and accidents and their relations, as it were, fused together in such a way that what I tell of is a simple light. I think I saw the universal form of this complex, because in telling of it, I feel my joy expand. So I'm going to flip the screen here in a moment and show examples of his emphasis on unity and his emphasis on diversity. But I would encourage you, if you want to pause the video right here and just look for yourself, think for yourself, where do you see instances of unity and where do you see instances of diversity in words or phrases? Okay, so here's your chance to pause, and I'm about to move on. All right, so here are some instances of the unity in this passage. Abundante gratia. I dared. Presunsi. There's even a sense of, I think I've included that one because there's a sense of, leaping. You're all in. You've taken a chance. It might not work out for you, but you're all in. La luce eterna, the eternal light. Its depth, tied con amore in un volume, one volume, a simple light, the universal form. And that last phrase, maybe you'd want to parse it differently, but at least the sense of joy as a wholeness, something that we can't really break down. It's different from things that make us happy, eating ice cream. Joy is more than that, isn't it? It's this really overwhelming sense of fullness. And I decided I would include the phrase "I feel" as part of that. You could argue that it belongs to the other side, as we'll see in a moment. But my feeling, my participation in that joy, in that oneness. So, you get the sense here of the importance of a oneness, eternal light, one volume, love, depth, simple light, universal form. You certainly get the sense here that he's doing something with this sense of oneness. Well, what is he doing? What is he doing with that? So here's the other side. And again, if you haven't paused, or you want to pause again now that you know sort of what I'm doing with this, here's your chance, because I'm about to go on to the next screen. So I dared to fix, you could say, my look. There's me, there's my individuality is part of this. This is Dante talking about his experience. I thought that even the idea of nel suo profondo vidi che s'interna legato con amore in un volume, that tied, that they were tied, and that the act of tying, I think, is a kind of discursive thing. You could maybe argue that it belongs with the other. I'm not too concerned. But scattered in leaves throughout the universe, scaderna. And the next line too, maybe opinions will differ, but I think like substances, sustanze, are meant to be the wholeness of a thing, and accidents are the appearances of things. So you might think that sustanze should be in red, but I thought that even our human knowing of what a substance is, I think, is really something less than the substance's participation in eternal being. So I thought I would include sustanze e accidenti, both of them, in the idea of the discursive and the multiple. E lo costume, their relations. And the idea that, I'm telling this. Dante is aware of himself in his own historical moment, writing a poem about this vision that he's having. I think that he's aware of that. I think he was aware of his own, individuality. And again, when he says, in telling of it, I feel my joy expand. Right? So the dicendo there in the last line is again part of the individuality. And Dante has come to the end of this great poem of his, massive cultural landmark for the development of Western culture. It's part of the turn to vernacular languages and what makes us think that, hey, our languages, we can do work in this as well, in these languages as well. So, the work itself is terribly important. And you can see here that in the culminating moment of this work, he's wrestling with phenomenon that he simply accepts to be true, and that is part of what enables the writing of this great poem. So it's part of the gift of the Augustinian vision, the way that Augustine reconciles our awareness of truth and our historical situatedness, our finitude. It's part of the gift of that to later culture. Okay, I have another example for you just a little bit later, and I think very much influenced by Dante, and that comes from, oh, pardon me. There's one other thing that I want to do before I move on. Right. Second last line, he says, la forma universal di questo nodo, credo, chi vidi. I think I saw the universal form of this complex, because in telling of it, I feel my joy expand. The translation there, I think, is the Italian word credo, which is the word that is the basis for I believe. And I think that that's really relevant here. I've suggested to you, don't worry about if Augustine is proving his points. See if you can enter into his rhetorical frame, if you can find yourself belonging to what it is that he's imagining. And Dante here uses the word credo to capture something similar, right? That it's not just about the work of discursive reason. And this is part of what he's trying to replicate through art, right? That art is an imitation, a mimesis, in Carney's sense, in the Aristotelian sense, a mimesis, an imitation of our actual engagement with reality, which is more than just discursive reason, more than just logic, but something different from arbitrariness or equivocal construction of meaning. So that word credo, I think, has an important tying function. Okay, now let me move on. So here's Chaucer doing something similar, and again, I'll just read this out, and then you can take a moment if you want to kind of play the same game that we've just been playing. I'll start with the signs of multiplicity and difference when I get to that. Ye wot that every evangelist that telleth us the pain of Jesus Christ, ne saith not all things as his fellow doth, but natheless his sentence is also, and all according as in his sentence, albeit there in his telling difference. For some of him sin more and some sin less. When there his pitus passion express, amen, of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, but doubtless his sentence is all un. Right. Okay. So I'll just give you a chance now to play with this for yourselves, and then we'll get into a little bit of analysis of these two ideas of multiplicity and unity. Okay. So here we can see some of the examples of the multiplicity that's being emphasized in this passage. Chaucer is talking about. He's setting up a poem that he's, or a tale that he's about to tell. It's a moral tale, and he's just written, he's just himself personally told a tale in poetry, and the host on the Canterbury Tales has shut him down because it was so crappy, and that's actually the word that is used. Your drastic reaming is not worth a third. And so he says, okay, well, I'll go from telling give me a second chance, and I won't tell one in poetry, I'll tell one in prose. And then he says, like, this is a real moral tale, so you shouldn't have any problems with this one. And then he says, it's like the Gospels. And then he makes this explanation. He says, like, okay, so like the whole point of a moral tale is that he's kind of arguing here is that there's one meaning to a moral tale, even though there's maybe differences in the way that it's told. And he makes a comparison to the Gospels. He says, look, there's one meaning, there's one kind of main event in the Gospels, even though there are 4 versions of the Gospels and they don't all seem to say exactly the same things. So he's aware of that problem in the biblical record, a historical document, and he's at the same time affirming the experience of a unity of truth. So he's using all of that as an analogy for the tale that he's about to tell, the tale that he's about to tell. But anyway, so there's 4 versions of the gospel story. Every evangelist saith not a thing as his fellow doth. They don't all say the same thing. There are differences in their telling. Well, and he uses that word. I'll be here in here telling different. So he emphasizes that idea of difference. And then he goes on to say this, some say more and some say less. And notice not to get too hung up on this, as I would if I were teaching Chaucer right now, but that some say more and some of them say more and some say less. Notice the alliteration of some saying, giving a sliding quality, not something that is contained, but something that, is evanescent, that slips through your fingers. When they, as Petrus Passion express, Amen of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. Again, the multiplicity of naming the 4 evangelists. And again, the alliteration of the sound has a kind of not quite contained, murmuring, getting away from you a little bit. So here he has picked up on the reality of difference, and he's applying it to, one of the most important interpretive sites for the development of Western culture, like in Western Christendom, at least, because he's talking about the Gospels, this really important document at the center of interpretation, right? So he's acknowledging that there's finitude, difference, history, particularity. Even, well, no, I was going to say equivocity, but that wouldn't quite really be true, because it's not purely equivocal. He's binding it together. He's acknowledging this and he's binding it together with unity, which we can see in the following screen. So again, I'll pause if you want to look for the signs of unity yourself. Okay, so ye wot that every evangelist that telleth us the pain of Jesu Christ. So there are 4 different versions of one event, of one reality that is the core message of the gospel for Chaucer. Nonetheless, his sentence is all soth. Their meaning sentence is a Middle English word that means meaning, or the core idea is all the same. And all according as in his sentence. So again, an emphasis on sameness. I'll be here and a telling difference. Some sin more and some sin less when they his Petrus Passion express. So their expressions are different, but they say the same thing, his Petrus Passion. So he is returning to that idea of the pain of Jesu Christ and reinforcing that as the one central meaning. Amen of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, but doubtless. Interesting use of the word doubtless, beyond doubt, finding the unity. His sentence, their meaning is all un. So he starts with the multiplicity of every evangelist. He ends here with the word un, an emphasis on the unity. So the way that he's doing this is just the act of writing poetry is an act that is meant to, again, in a Dantean sense, reconcile or move beyond the reality of a kind of tension between difference and unity. So to find the unity within the difference. And I'll just draw your attention to kind of 4 lines here. These lines, he's had this couplet here, fine, difference, unity. And then in these 4 lines together, dulce sentence, difference. Notice that he has difference, unity, unity, difference. So he pairs them, but flips them, right? Starting going from difference to unity, then unity to difference. He encloses unity within lines of difference. And notice that he rhymes sentence and difference. He brings them together in a rhyming couplet. So he really is trying to, I think it's pretty evident that he is actively, consciously engaging in this phenomenon of unity and diversity belonging together. And I think he's probably getting this directly from Dante, who is someone who he imitates. He's writing about half a century later than Dante. He's following Dante's example of writing in the vernacular. If Dante can write in Italian, why can't I write in English? So he's probably immediately influenced by Dante, but I think he's also influenced by Augustine, and he's certainly influenced by the Augustinian inheritance here. The inner word as a way of doing this, and it gives him confidence. It gives early modern culture confidence to explore the world, to take on difficult questions, to produce art. Okay, here's a 3rd example. This is a modern poet. This is a poem by Czesław Miłosz, who was writes this poem in 1988. And here's this relatively long poem. I'm not going to read the whole thing out, I don't think, but I'll give you a chance to do that before I turn to analyzing it in terms of unity and multiplicity. Okay, so just take a moment, and I'm about to move on. Okay, so here are some examples of the unity, the vision, the sense of the whole that comes through in this poem. I entered the clarity of early morning. Okay, it's a particular morning, but there's a kind of clarity, of an ability to see, and again, an intuition of a whole. Something is clear, an encounter with beauty. And then, what is it that he sees? What is it that he realizes? He realizes unity. I was not separated from people. So the notion there is the sense of a unity. And then grief and pity joined us. Again, you could say, okay, individual acts of grief or moments of grief, individual moments of pity, but there's something about we're still dealing with that idea of being joined. And then what's that all about? What's his affirmation? What is it that he sees that's true about being or about the experience in the world? We are all children of the King. He acknowledges the notion of where we come from, and that there is no division. We're miserable. We use no more than 100th part of the gift. So participatory being, the presence of meaning, or the presence of the word in the particularities of our experience of the world. Then you're going to get a long stanza on those particularities that ends with the word fulfillment. They dwell in us, waiting for a fulfillment. the notion of the dwelling, the particulars, that they stay in us, like Augustine's memory. They dwell in us as participations in the fullness of reality. I knew, I think, harkens back to the idea of clarity. I really know this. I know this, and I know it as something that I can only unpack discursively. And even this poem, as a kind of whole, is only one poem that's a participation in the traditioned unfolding of this realization. In this context, the symbol of the vineyard is a whole, as are all men and women living at the same time. Again, drawing together people into a whole. Okay, let's look at it from the other side. Again, a brief pause if you want to pause and do this on your own first. One after another, my former lives were departing. Those moments, those experiences, those episodes, like ships. Again, a plurality of ships. And the countries, the cities, and the countries, cities, gardens, the bays of seas, assigned to my brush came closer. The multiplicity of his experiences. Notice the length of the line, the building of a list. We forget the forgetfulness of being, the forgetfulness of our connectedness to one another and our participation in a being, in a reality that we share. Being children of the King. What is it that we do? Well, this is a description of discursive logic, of thinking, of parsing, right here, where he says, for where we come from, there is no division into yes and no, is, was, will be. Time itself and our divisions of time into past, present, and future are part of our finitude and part of the way that we experience the world. But there is, he's suggesting here, a beyondness, a oneness. We use no more than 100th part, okay, for our long journey, moments. And then he gives another list, a list of moments, of things that we know and that we treat as individual self-contained things, but actually carry within them a charge of meaning, a sense of belonging to, if we were to actually pay attention to them. A sword blow, the painting of eyelashes before a mirror of polished metal, a lethal musket shot, a caravel staving its hull against a reef. All of these realities in different times, in different places, all of them carrying a sense of moreness. They dwell in us, waiting for a fulfillment. I knew always that I would be a worker, just one amongst many, as are all men and women living at the same time, whether they are aware of it or not, that sometimes we can know a thing or can participate in a thing without, having conscious awareness of it. So he's really, like the others, drawing these things together. And I think this is, although he's a contemporary poet, there's nothing particularly, when we think of postmodernism, I think we think of a certain kind of culture, a certain sort of brashness and open-endedness, bricolage, drawing attention to the violence of things. He's not postmodern in that way, but I think the very affirmation is different from the modern. Certainly different from the kind of modernity that, for instance, Guide is describing in that lecture on that you looked at in an earlier week. Okay, I want to close off this portion of the course by looking at two paintings that also, I think, engage in the same phenomenon. So here's the first one. This is painting by Giotto, who is an Italian maker of frescoes in the 14th century. This is early on in the 14th century. It's called The Lamentation. And it's a picture of Christ after the crucifixion. And what I want you to notice here is Giotto's interest in connecting the three realms, the natural, the anthropic, and the divine. So you get you start, you've got this natural, they're on the ground, they're laying Jesus on the ground. You have the ground is pretty prominent here. I want to talk about this in another sense. You got the mountains in the background. You've got this tree. So you've got the realm of nature. You obviously clearly have the realm of people in the foreground. I was going to say dominating the picture, but I'm not even sure that that's entirely true, because then you also have this realm of the angels, the realm of the divine. So you have these three realms all brought together in the painting. Giotto is considered to be an early exemplar of a move towards naturalism. He gives us, I think, the first painting in Western art without a religious object in it, so just an ordinary landscape. But here he's bringing the three realms together, and look at the way that he does it. Okay, so the divine is up here, but the divine is also here on the ground. So the high and the low, both ends of this spectrum of being are brought together. Now, clearly, Giotto is a religious painter, and he's working within the Christian tradition, but it's nonetheless noteworthy of what it is that he's trying to do. Let's see. Let's back up here. My arrow kind of froze on me for a moment. So there's that to bear in mind. There's also, I just need to pause for a moment because I'm about to lose my battery power. So I'm going to, just got to figure this out here. Come back to this and pause. Okay, sorry about that little interruption. Let me just get my screen back here. And I was talking about Giotto as a religious painter is working within the Christian tradition and working with the idea of the incarnation. So God, or Jesus, is both God and human at the same time. So you have the bringing together of the divine and the human realms, the divine and the natural. The other thing to notice here is the way that compositionally the painting goes from the bottom realm here, and your eye is drawn to this level, and then he leads you up through nature, through the rock, and your eye naturally follows up here, and then through the tree into the divine realm. So again, unity as opposed to difference, a connectedness between the realms. Think back to Dupre. Think back to paragraph 4 on him talking about how even within the Jewish and the Christian traditions, that idea of cosmos or physis is being preserved, this ontotheological synthesis. But notice too that my cursor is really bugging me here. Notice too that there is this tree here, which is the cross, right? So that cross is a suffering. That cross is distinction, is difference, and that is part of what he's doing. is building in difference and disconnectedness into the very connectedness of the overall composition. So not univocity, but not equivocity either. Okay, that's the one example. My second example, so that's it, 1305, 1306, and here I'm kind of making a segue to the next portion of the course, and in this painting. So this is from 1509, 1510. This is Raphael. The painting's called The Disputation on the Sacrament. If you're visual learners, what could be more obvious? Look at the line of separation. There's no connectedness here between the realm where the people are disputing and the realm that they're disputing about. The knowledge has to pass through this gap. Now, you could argue that that gap is, equally important as it is in the Giotto painting, but I think that it's pretty striking, the difference between the two. So I would say that this is like a picture of nominalism. So you have here your person who is pointing, who's insisting that this is the altar. So this is the disputation on the sacrament. This is the sacrament in the technical sense of the Christian sacraments. This is the Eucharist, and what this guy is doing is he is pointing to the divine realm, insisting that this has meaning, but it's a nominalistic kind of insistence. It's something that he can only assert in an equivocal way. There's a sense of arbitrariness here, and some might accept it, some might not accept it, right? So the environment is, I think, very different from this, where yes, okay, you do have that still here in the notion of the tree. There is separation. There is the necessity of, well, like to use Dante's word, credo. There's the necessity of belief, but that what we mean by belief, I think, has already begun to shift as we move into modernity. All right, we're going to be talking more about that in the coming weeks after the writing of the midterm, and we're going to be at the same time working on the continuation of the ontotheological synthesis in the writings of Thomas Aquinas. So Thomas, and then we'll be looking at Thomas through a 20th century essay written about the same time as Gadamer is working. So we're going to carry on the conversation about the critique of modernity from within a 20th century context, and the fleshing out of what the ontotheological synthesis means, or what the pre-modern view of the world and the pre-modern view of language, rhetoric, meaning is, and how it shifts, how we shift from that to the modern understanding. So that's what's coming, but for now, we can just concentrate on the notion of the inner word, and these last few slides have been to just give you a sense of its power, and its the way that people are able to work with it in creative ways in subsequent centuries. And that's where I'm going to leave it. So I'll say goodbye for now. Thanks.